Welcome to the Meditation Podcast. You can find the show along with all my other podcasts. Just scan the QR code or go to roycollin.com. If you're looking for virtual assistance, go to va.world. My guest helps people who look fine on the outside but feel fried on the inside, understand what's actually happening beneath the stress, and more importantly, what to do about it. Her work is grounded in mindfulness, breathwork, and nervous system regulation, but it's delivered in a practical, no-fluff way that resonates with people who are skeptical of self-care and tired of being told to slow down. She's the author of Inner Affirmations, using mindfulness to connect to your inner wisdom. And those watching on BitChute, YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify will actually see I'm holding up the book from Atlanta, Georgia. Please welcome Katharine Chestnut.
Thank you for having me, Roy.
No problem. I'm looking forward to it. So I suppose I always kind of get the journey first, because there's usually a transformation in life. Something happens, we get kind of railrolled and figure out what's going on. What was your story?
What brought me to this place here, it really happened over many, many years. I didn't just land here overnight, but the turning point that really sent me down this path solidly was when I was in an emotionally abusive marriage, and I woke up in the hospital on Thanksgiving Day and decided that I could not function like this anymore. I did not want to live my life like this anymore. I knew that already, but that was, sadly, I had to get to that place of crisis to actually solidly put my foot in the door and take that path. I had been for years searching for, I don't know, the magic key to help me be calm and composed and self-assured, and also heal whatever stuff I had going on at the time. And I had been to lots of retreats and read lots of books, and all of those things came back to me in that moment that I woke up in the hospital. And I had all the tools. I just had to start using them. And that was what was the turning point for me.
And after that happened, and how did the transformation begin?
Well, it first I had to extract myself from that toxic relationship. But actually, the first thing I did was I started writing. I started journaling, and journaling the way that, and you have my book, journaling the way that I had learned to journal a couple decades before. And because I didn't have anything else. And that form of journaling really shines a light on your own inner truth and what you know to be true, but sometimes we don't always want to listen. And that was the first thing I started doing, is I got a notepad and a pencil and I just started writing. And then slowly over time, I started revisiting some things like meditation that I hadn't been successful at in the past. And I discovered some things, some things I didn't expect. One, you don't have to go to the high Himalayas and become a monk to be a truly good meditator. You don't have to sit a certain way. And most importantly, you're not going to empty your brain. And my brain is never empty. And that's true for everybody. And I actually didn't realize that. I thought that, oh, I'm such a failure. I can't empty my brain. I tried for years. No, it's the practice of coming into the moment and paying attention to your breath or paying attention to your body and being in that moment. And when your mind, which its job is to scan for threats and to be looking for things all the time, when your mind starts to wander off, go, oh, hey, I see you going over there. Just come on back here for a moment. It's the returning part that is the practice that is the most helpful, returning to our own presence and returning to being in the moment. And I could do that. And that was amazing. And I could do it anywhere because as we talked prior to starting the recording, I used to travel a lot for work. I was an executive and I worked with Fortune 100 companies. I was Miss Corporate Kick-Ass and I was constantly on the go and never taking a moment to myself. And when I discovered that, being able to, oh, I can do this while I'm in an airport or on an airplane or in an Uber on the way to an office meeting, that was magical for me.
And I think, unfortunately, some kind of meditation centers, they get people to sit a certain way and try to clean their mind instead of like letting them know, hey, there's thousands of ways to do this. You just find what works for you. And then people think they're broken. Oh, there's something wrong. I'm not able to do this. This is actually feels uncomfortable. Sit a certain way. I mean, I remember I used to lie down. I could never feel comfortable sitting a certain way. And it wasn't about going to meditate, it's just finding what worked for me. And then now it's pure mindfulness. It's just being totally present in the moment is what actually serves me. But yeah, I know that some people, when you talk to them, they think, yeah, it doesn't work for me. And it's because, yeah, they're told put their fingers a certain way and have emptiness. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. So with the journaling that you mentioned, were you putting everything that was kind of happening in thoughts? Because why I ask is sometimes people kind of, when they're journaling about what's going on, good and bad. And then others, they kind of tend to just put the bad, which I think when they're reading it later ain't good for them. And there's others doing positive stuff. What way were you doing it? And what way would you kind of recommend people now to do it?
So you've read the book. So I will tell you, this is my journal right here. And in fact, I lead a live journaling session every Monday. So Monday morning in about an hour, I'll be doing that. It's on Insight Timer. It's free. And we journal. And your question about what should I write about? I'm paraphrasing, but essentially that's, I think, what you're asking. So first off, there are people who swear by gratitude journaling. And I don't think that that's bad. I personally cannot do it every single day. There are people that will write down what they're grateful for every day, and it becomes, to me, boring. It becomes rote, and it loses its meaning. It loses its impact because I'm doing it every single day. So it becomes another chore, another task. There's also, I think this was a few years ago, there was this whole thing about, oh, you have to get up in the morning and journal for 30 minutes or an hour and just stream of consciousness. And I'm like, who has time for that? Who, what? No. But I think the idea behind that was as that if you're just writing and writing and writing, eventually you'll get to what's going on inside. And because when we typically journal, and I know before I learned this form of journaling, we're writing what our egos, what our logical brain is telling us. All of those messages are being reinforced. All of those shoulda, coulda, wouldas. I should feel this way and I should think this way. And we're writing that down again because the ego's job is to protect us, and it thinks it's doing it by telling us, hey, you should feel this way. You should feel good, or you should feel bad, or whatever. And when I was first taught this process, I was like, this is crazy. And for the listeners that aren't familiar with it, some people call it non-dominant handwriting. Some people call it automatic handwriting. I call it mindful journaling because when you're writing with your non-dominant hand, you are practicing mindfulness. You have to be in the moment because you're focused on the pen. You're focused on the pen, on the paper, and trying to make the letters legible, which you can see. This is mine. It looks like chicken scratching.
It looks like my writing.
And the point is not necessarily to be able to read this afterwards. And most of the time I can read it. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes I look at it and go, no idea what I wrote. But I know here, I know in my heart what I wrote. And what happens is that in a way, we get our ego and our logic and our pragmatic brain, which I love all of that stuff, right? And society loves that stuff. But all of that gets a little quieter. And what happens is that the voice that we have a tendency not to listen to, some people call it intuition, that inner voice, that inner wisdom that knows, has a chance to be heard. And I thought about writing this book for 17 years. Even when I was in the middle of that very traumatic relationship and I myself wasn't journaling, it never left my mind because I found it so incredibly valuable as a tool to not disconnect completely from my logic and my ego, but to give my inner voice a chance to speak. So when I said the first thing I did when I woke up in the hospital was I started journaling, this is what I started doing because I needed the reality of why I was there, my part in it, and what I was going to do moving forward. So what do you write about? Sometimes I just sit down and I just start writing words and let whatever words need to come out. I have had a number of people ask me for more help with prompts. So that's why I created Inner Affirmation Inspirations, it's 365 prompts and ideas to get you started. It's to get you started with your journaling. You can start with gratitude if you want, but just let it go from there. Or if you have a decision to make and you're torn, I like to start with a list of pros and cons, and I do it in this way because the truth of those things will start to come up for me. And then I can see more clearly. It's about having clarity. So there's no right thing to write about and no wrong thing to write about. But when you're doing this, it's going to flow in the direction that it needs to, that is best for you in that moment.
And the thing is, I think by actually writing with the nerve endings, because sometimes people think they'll type it out and that's the same thing, and it's not, because that's just the fingers doing that, as opposed to writing with your hand, you're doing it with your left. And it's something I've always been kind of conscious of, because even brushing your teeth sometimes, because I remember I was at a Mind Valley event, and there was a Geelong Tongue. So he was on about kind of mini mindful meditations with the brushing of your teeth. So then I started doing it with the left hand, brushing my teeth with the left hand, because we just go into the habit of doing that. But the same, like my youngest son, he's 12 now, but we got like a ping pong table. And, I was starting to beat him, just, so then I said, all right, I'm going to play with my left hand. And at the start, and I was surprised how good I got. Same with darts. I can start playing with my left hand, just switch it up a bit. And, just do it for fun. But I think everyone should start trying things like that.
Absolutely. I love those types of little jolts of mindfulness, like you said, brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. It's also like they say when you do like this, like how do you know what I mean? Like when you
Yeah.
put your fingers together, it's like there's a way that we normally do it, and when you do it the other way, it feels off. But it brings you right here, right now, in this moment, because you're paying attention. And I think that that's a lot of what we need more of. That's what mindfulness is being aware. And what does it take to become more aware?
With stress and say burnout. Because society is organized in such a way that we're beaten left, right, and center. And unfortunately, a lot of people blame themselves, thinking they're a failure. But if you understand how the whole strings are pulled, everything is orchestrated to be an attack on us. And then people they just kind of go down the spiral. So dealing with stress, because there's burnout and there's stress, and this kind of, the different, but yet they're connected as well. So if we deal with the stress kind of thing, because you can even see it if you're in a place of mindfulness, you know, i I call it, you're like bulletproof, that even if someone is road rage or somebody's attack, you're just kind of looking at them and you're just going, and eventually they'll start apologizing for losing. But you kind of, nobody is in their driving seat, so they don't know the journey they're going through, like abusive relationships, because we hear that, that happens on both sides, both female and male. And it's a case of how should they tap into to step away, instead of kind of, as you I'd mentioned in the interview, kind of running empty, because they just think this is just the way it is, and eventually the tank runs out of juice.
So it takes practice. It takes repetition. Now, before, a listener goes, ugh, yeah, another thing I have to do. I talk to people, and, I was there. I was that, person running from one meeting to the next, through one airport to the next. I was that girl. And there was never a moment to breathe. And you know what? We say that. Think about that. I don't even have a chance to breathe. But that's what we need. is a moment to breathe, is take that moment. And when I get on the airplane, I don't sit down and immediately whip out my laptop because, I'm trying to get ahead of the next thing. I do a breath meditation or a body scan meditation now. And maybe it lasts a minute or 5. I have a minute. I have 5 minutes to breathe, to take a breath. And finding those moments, that's the key to relieving the stress. It's when our bodies are constantly in a state of fight or flight that's the stress, right? Because we're prepped to fight or flee. But when we breathe intentionally, or we do a body scan, or we do a visualization, pick something, pick anything. When we do those things, we are activating our parasympathetic nervous system, our ability to rest and digest, that safety mode. And that safety mode, even if you feel it for 60 seconds, I created a meditation that is 90 seconds long because sometimes it feels like that's all I've got. But 90 seconds, a few times a day, whenever you can fit it in, transitioning from one thing to the next, sitting in your car. I used to meditate while I was sitting waiting for my daughter to come out of dance class or choir practice. I could have been doing anything. I could have been doom scrolling. No, I was sitting there and I was meditating or breathing or anything. And taking those moments where you find them, because they will present themselves, will allow you to dial back the stress. And so eventually there's a calmness that comes over you that is more prevalent than your jacked up on 5 cups of espresso persona that you may have had before. So it's easier to deal with something that goes wrong. And I will tell you that the thing that will set me off the quickest is if the internet goes out. Like as I mentioned before, I own a co-working community, and if the internet goes out, that is the thing that will set me off, because if there's no internet, there's no reason for anybody to be there. I mean, there is, but you know what I'm saying. And in the past, the internet would go down and I would immediately go into panic, full on panic mode. And as time has progressed, as I have become more mindful and calm, now when it goes out, I'm like, okay, let me do the checklist of the things that are important, that could possibly be the thing that is broken. I'm coming from a place of calm now. Being in panic mode, the only thing that did was send my blood pressure up and freak out everybody around me. When I'm coming from a place of calm, I mean, they all knew I was going to fix it. But when I'm coming from this place of calm, they still know I'm going to fix it, but they don't freak out because I'm not freaking out. And it makes life so much more pleasant to not be freaking out all the time.
That happens a lot in the workplace because I remember, like, I worked for a construction company in Ireland, and the guy's name was Peter, and they used to call him Peter Panic. So, like, when he was freaking out, it was like everybody had to freak out, Whereas when I was running jobs, I'd never done that. There was nobody. It was like, you're going to get curveballs, especially in construction. There's always something. And it's just deal with it. And even last week, like with my podcast, I kind of monetized the dynamic ad insert. And I got an email from Podbean. Europe made a new ruling that we no longer, so they just turned off the tap just like that. It's like, and it was just kind of, all right, that's what it is. There's no point in getting upset. There's no point in getting angry. And then I was like, all right, I need to try and see what's the alternatives. And I was trying to see, could I get somebody to have a company that I know on the thing? But people were panicking because I said, look, it's a once a month input. And I just opened an American company over the weekend in Miami because I'm big into understanding tax optimization and stuff like that. But it's like, all right, there's a week to, but it didn't end, and it's just reacting. Whereas sometimes people would have a hissy fit, no matter what happens in life. And it gets 100 times worse because then people, maybe if you're working in a team, they're not as efficient and they're making mistakes. And then you're giving out to them, hey, you made a mistake. But the reality is, it could have been you freaking out that caused them to make the mistake. And people need to do that and just step back.
Yeah, that moment, the pause is so powerful, right? If you just, and I mean, it works with when you have kids too. You probably know this, right? And because kids are great at trying to push your buttons because it's their job. They're figuring out boundaries for themselves and testing your boundaries to figure out what their boundaries are. And my daughter, when she was a teenager, teenagers, it's a wonder any of us make it past that age. But she would poke and poke and poke and poke. And I was like, eventually I would say, you shouldn't poke the bear again. Don't poke the bear anymore. And most of the time, I would keep my cool, or I would just say, I'm about to not be able to be this anymore. So how about we take a break from each other for 30 minutes or something like that? But what we're doing also when we're doing that is modeling that. We're modeling that kind of boundary for our kids too. Better to do that in any kind of crisis because you can think more clearly. You come from a place of clarity. You have more perspective.
And I mean, I'm able to do that as well. And it's brilliant because instead of just snapping, when a child, I mean, they're figuring out themselves as well. But when you go, you're actually, making me angry now, and I've asked you to do such a thing or whatever it is. And it's like it rarely exceeds that because you've kind of said, you're at this level now, and don't let me. Whereas, unfortunately, a very high percentage of people just snap, and then they just react, and whether they, some hit their kids. I don't, but I mean, some people do, and different things happen. But it's like when you're in control, you're able to go, or in any situation, not just with children, but even in a business situation or something. If somebody's stepping on your toe, you're able to stay in control and kind of say, don't talk to me. I've often done that. Don't ever talk to me like that, but calmly. Whereas usually people that aren't calm, they'll scream and go, don't talk. And then it just ends up in a screaming match. But when you remain calm, 95% of the time, they step back and they apologize for what they've done. And it doesn't lead to an awkward situation.
Absolutely. You'll notice how people who come from a place of calm seem to be able to, I don't want to, the power isn't the right word, but they seem to have more power or more presence. Maybe that's the word, more presence in a situation than the people that are losing it. Yeah.
And even, I mean, I've had a lot of different situations, kind of just with the fraudulent stuff going on in the world, with judges not being afraid of them, with police. And you see them because when you call somebody out on their lies or corruption or whatever, they usually do that. They do the puppy dog. That's what I call it. Like they just nod and, they can't look you in the eyes and stuff like that. And I think people need to realize the power that they have within themselves once you're being true. And then that gives you, I suppose, more strength to realize I should have been doing this a lot longer.
Well, it's we all have so much power within us, and we give it away. And that is where I also feel like mindfulness and breath, which brings us back into our bodies and allows us to feel that power. And we don't have to, go out and use it. It's just there. But that energy is going out around us. It's, I have friends who also around the globe have co-working spaces, and they tell horror stories of things that people do. Like, and I sometimes I'm very puzzled. And I'm not saying I haven't had some bad actors come my way, but some of the things they tell me that happen are kind of unbelievable. And I think to myself, man, am I lucky? I haven't had people like that come in here. And then I realize, oh no, they're not coming here because they know I'm not going to put up with that, because my energy is sending that out to the universe. My energy is saying, nope, we're not having any of that here. We're going to be good to each other here.
Yeah. You've kindly give me a meditation which will go out on the after the show. You might kind of just touch because, I love listening to the different meditations, and I was like, I was listening to prior today or earlier. I was listening. I was just like, I like it. I like the voice. I like just the way that. So you might kind of, because I know you're on Insight Timer. You've got a lot, so you might maybe if you remember the one that we're talking about that you've given me. But even if not, just kind of discuss your kind of style on the meditations.
So all of my meditations, first off, come from my own experience. So here's a true story. Why did I become a meditation teacher? Because, as I mentioned before, when I was recovering from that abusive marriage, I was looking for everything that I could do to help me recover. People ask me, what do you want? I'm like, I want to be happy again. I don't want to cry every day. I want to be happy. And I discovered Insight Timer. I can't remember how. But when I discovered the whole guided meditation thing, I was like, oh, this is what's been missing. This is the piece that I've been missing all this time. And I was listening, and I was, for obvious reasons, listening to meditations that primarily dealt with healing and emotional healing and, dealing with abusive situations. And there wasn't much on Insight Timer in that addressed that. And I was like, we need more of these. So in typical Katharine fashion, Katharine decided to become a meditation teacher. and start creating more of those meditations because I needed them. And so every single one of my meditations or courses all comes from inspiration from my own life. So this emotional healing with white light meditation, I remember that one was inspired because I was lying in bed and I was feeling, I don't know, I got triggered by something. And I was like, I just need to imagine this white light around me. And then as I'm doing that, I was like, "Oh, wait." So I grabbed my phone and I'm like, remind me to make a meditation about emotional healing with white light or whatever I said. And that's how they happen. I'll be doing something and I'll go, "Oh, yes." And I'll just, wherever I am, I'll write it down. I'll send myself an email or a reminder or something. But they all come from that place. And when I'm writing them, and obviously I went through a process of training. But when I'm writing them, I'm thinking about what would I say to my best friend? And how would I want my best friend to feel going through this process? And when I'm recording them, which I do right here at this desk, there's a chair on the other side uh, of the screen, and I imagine somebody sitting there, and I'm speaking to them. You know, I made a meditation for my daughter because as she was growing up and having to make choices for herself, it's hard as a parent to let go. And yet I knew that the best thing I could do was to send her loving light. And so when I recorded that one, I imagined she was sitting in front of me. And I think that's why my voice becomes the way that it does, because I'm speaking to somebody. And so when somebody is listening, I'm speaking to them.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Really nice. So the actually before we touch on what you're covering in the book, what I want to say is the journal, because it was when you were showing it there, I just remembered it's a really good quality journal, because I mean there's lots of people out there getting journals, and but it's like when I saw it, I was like, it's, I don't know, it just, it has a feel good factor to it. And yeah, I just kind of, maybe why the purple and how you came into such a good quality. Because usually people, they don't do that. They just kind of, yeah, normal kind of thing. But that's, I remember like just holding it and opening it and going, wow, this is really beautiful.
Thank you. So my background is in strategic marketing planning. So as you might imagine, I built, when I was building my brand, uh, I went through the process of choosing colors and fonts and all of that. And when I decided that I wanted to have journals on my website too, I ordered about 20 samples. I got about 20 different samples of journals, and I tried every single one of them. And I have a girlfriend who likes to write with felt tip pens. So the paper had to be good enough and heavy enough that it wouldn't bleed through the paper. And I wanted it to be the right size, that it would go with the books so you could carry them together. I wanted it to feel good in your hands. I wanted the paper to feel significant because what you're writing is important. And yeah, purple. I like purple. But it's also on brand as well because there is the marketing person in me too that's all about that.
No, but I mean, you've achieved it. But it's great that you've actually said that because you can see, well, this wasn't just, oh, I get these. And yeah, so it's brilliant the amount of thought that went into it and how you prepared. So with the book, then, just for those interested, like, might just kind of give a bit of a synopsis on what you're covering in it. I know we're talking about a lot of the stuff, but for those that,
So, the book walks you through the process of how to start journaling mindfully. It's step by step. It's what traditional journaling looks like, what this form of journaling looks like, how to practice. So, how to compare what I think that's in the second chapter, where you get to write something down just the way you normally would. And then in the next chapter, without looking at what you wrote, go write down answer the same questions. And I think that was when I was learning how to do this, that was so enlightening. Like, whoa, really? That's hugely different. But what I wrote with my non-dominant hand is more true. So it walks you through that process. But then this is the piece that I added to it, which was kind of, what do I want to say? Uh, a little bit of it was an accident, I think, maybe. I remember writing one day in my journal, and there was something that I wrote that I wanted to remember for the rest of the day. I wanted to carry it with me. And so I wrote it on a little scrap of paper and I stuck it in my pocket. And I started doing that every time I journaled. I would, if there was something meaningful, I would write it and stick it in my pocket. And it would be there throughout the day. And sometimes I would feel it and go and look at it and go, oh, okay, right. And it would give me that pause, right? Sometimes that we don't always take. And so I remember going to a therapy session and the therapist asked me a question and I pulled out my little piece of paper and I read it. And she goes, "Where did you get that?" And I said, "I wrote it." And she said, "You should write a book." I'm shortening the story a bit, but you get the idea. And for 17 years, I never forgot that. And so in the latter part of the book, it talks about taking your writing and creating your own affirmations with your writing, because you can read affirmations all day long, but if they don't resonate, they're not helping you. So when if you take it from your own writing, it's exactly right and perfect for you in that moment. And so the book walks you through that process. I like to say that the book is small but mighty.
yeah. Oh, excellent. And I see as well from your website that you have a course. You might just let the listeners know what the course is that you're offering.
There are two courses there right now. One is the mindful journaling course, which walks you through the process, and there's videos of me walking you through the process. There's also a 7-day reset. And I'm in the process of, I used to have challenges, and I decided to take all those down and turn them all into courses. So those will be going up there again soon. But um, The 7-day reset I did because sometimes people go, "Oh my God, I can't do this for a month," or whatever, and I'm just like, "Just do 7 days then. 7 days. That's all you can do a week. A week is fine. Whatever you need."
Listen, I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I'd highly recommend people check out your book. You might let the listeners know where they can find you.
Well, my website for sure, katharineChestnut.com, but I have over 1,000 videos on YouTube and several hundred meditations on Insight Timer as well.
No, excellent. And make sure I put the link for Insight Timer, your YouTube, and your website, both on the audio and the video. Thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you.
Well, that's all for the Meditation Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on meditationpodcast.org. You'll find all my other shows. Scan the QR code or go to roycollin.com. If you're looking for virtual assistants, go to va.world. Sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with maybe 3 friends. And when you check out Catherine's book, do the same, because the algorithms will actually allow more people to see it. And as you heard, it's a lot of people need this. Until next week, take care.